Welcome to February's Darbar by Bunga Azaadi. Let me know if you can hear me. There should be guys on the YouTube and the Discord. Just put in the chat if you can hear me, and then I guess we'll get started after that. Yeah, I can hear. Yes, Ali, you can hear me. Okay, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, it won't be a too long one this month. I was thinking of changing up how we do the bars each month as well, going forward. Also, if anyone's on the YouTube, just let me know if you can hear me on the YouTube side. I hope you guys can. But if not, obviously just send me a message in the chat so I can see the chat. Feel free to interact in the chat, ask questions and stuff. So I'll quickly run through the structure of these bars and how I'm thinking of doing them going forward. So I want to keep a kind of session every month where the Bunga offers a space for anybody to basically hold us accountable. So whatever we output during the month, and if it's something you didn't like, call us out on it, and this is the sort of opportunity to do so. And then I can answer any questions, take on any counter arguments, or even feedback, that kind of thing. So it's kind of our way of sort of trying to prevent becoming an echo chamber and constantly listen to Sangat's feedback and also share idea. Cool. So we will also do a roundup of the kind of outposts and stuff, the outputs we do this during the month as well. So obviously if you haven't paid attention during the month with what the Bunga's been doing or whatever, this is kind of another opportunity in which we can sort of like just round things up and summarize. And it's generally a platform as well if you've got any questions and stuff about Azaadism in general, Sikhi, Statecraft, etc., then again this is a platform which to do it. The actual kind of like interview kind of things like we did in previous Darbars when I bring people on, I'm thinking of doing them more during the month rather than saving them for the end of month Darbar. And the reason for that mainly is because if somebody can't do the end of the month time wise, kind of screwed then. So we might as well just do them as separate kind of events where I can interview people who if I find interesting or you guys find interesting want me to speak with. So it'd be good to do some of those. Especially even like non-SIGs as well, I was thinking. So I was thinking some of the economists like from the Austrian School, Mises Institute, even perhaps someone like Yarrow and Brooke. It might be good, interesting things like bring them onto some of these kind of like platforms and discuss Statecraft with them. It might be insightful as well. So there's something I'm thinking about bringing on board, and maybe we might be doing more during the month as well in terms of interview formats. But these bars themselves, I think let's keep them for these kind of like accountability sessions, question and answer, and roundups. So kind of way for us to catch up with you guys as well. Yeah, so cool. I've mentioned that part. So essentially, there were some questions that came in, so we'll go through them today. If you guys have any questions you want me to answer as well in the chat, just let me know. I can see both the YouTube chat and the Discord chat, so whichever platform you're on, I can see. So this month we didn't actually output that much compared to last month. In fact, yeah, most of it actually was we set up this Discord server, which is probably the new thing. So this Discord server is going to be our sort of like main way to communicate with Sangat and way people can interact with the Bunga and also advance through the Bunga as well. So before we used to have a private Discord server for like sort of like members, so we've updated the way membership sort of works as well, which you can sort of read through on the channels to the side about clearance levels and rankings, all that kind of stuff. And I was inspired by like Saddam Singh's book Road to Empire, where they sort of had like the Anandpur Darbars, where this kind of institution where the actual like Gavi and the philosophers and all this kind of stuff would have their like private manses essentially, right, and residences. And spaces in which they could do their philosophizing and debating each other and all that kind of stuff. But then there'd also be like a public forum element as well, where the Gavis and the philosophers and stuff can interact and share their findings and share their video and stuff with the Sangat at large who are living in Anandpur. So in a similar fashion, I want to have this server have a public kind of forum area where like anyone can join, anyone can interact with us and use it. And there's also then private spaces for higher clearance level members, which we can keep separate for more private Vichaars, and also then project planning and stuff like that. So that's probably the way we're going to go forward with this. So this Discord server probably going to be our main way of hosting the Bunga, and be more and more opportunities to get involved. You can check out the server board as well for things, which I'll also show you our kind of like editing method as well, which if you guys want to get involved with. Yeah, so there's that side of things, and then yeah, hopefully we're gonna start a book club as well. This we'll start announcing a bit more about this as well soon, and we'll start kick launching this as well, and that'd be a cool interactive way to read together, learn together, share video, etc. Then what else happened during the month? Oh yeah, so yeah, this Jungi War stuff happened this month as well. So there's this page of run by Neo-Khalistanis who got a bit triggered by Azadism, and they tried to release a series of hit pieces against us. They were pretty poorly constructed, very bad faith and full of ad hominem. And the actual critiques themselves were extremely inaccurate. So like you can critique the Azadist manifesto and our outputs, but there's a way to do it. And I guess the biggest lesson with this was this is not how you do critique. It just didn't make sense, half the critiques, if you actually read the manifesto. There's prescribing positions that we just didn't have, and the framing was just way off. We actually had, I think I posted it. Yeah, here it is. So Game Singh from Sikhs in Court, he's actually done a critique of the Azadist manifesto. He started one at least. He's gone for the introduction at the moment so far. And his critique is a good example of how exactly you would go about critiquing it. It's very sophisticated critique. It's high level, it's quality, and I recommend everyone to sort of read those as well. Kim Singh's one I respect massively as well. He's in court. Obviously, we disagree on things, but I also respect his opinion a lot. And it's just a world of difference between hearing critique from someone like this versus someone like these Neo-Khalistanis. It's a massive lesson for all Sangat to sort of realise, okay, well, if you are going to do critiques and stuff like this, be in good faith and do them properly and actually have some substance as well. Because then when I challenge these guys to actually jump onto and have a debate with me live here on Discord, they just didn't turn up. Obviously in their story the same day we posted this, they were like, oh no, bad faith, we're done here, we ain't doing anymore. And then yeah, all their posts against us stopped at that point. And we didn't hear anything else again from them. So it just shows the level of character these guys are operating on. If they aren't willing to defend their positions in an honest manner via a debate, then what are they doing? Are they just sort of like using social media to like, mudsling and that's it? But yeah, bad faith actors. I'm not going to give it too much more attention really. I mean, they're not really worthy of the attention, to be honest. If there's actual genuine critiques and stuff, then we would have loved to hear them. But we couldn't find anything of that substance. There were a couple of points they've made that I think is probably worth addressing, but we probably won't address them to them directly. We'll probably just do a more general, like demystifying myths of Azadism kind of type things. So one of them actually was an interesting one where they actually mentioned a document called the Samvad document. So we as a Bunga dug it out, we found it and we sort of like read through it and like got it to like summarise all this kind of stuff. And in a nutshell, I've got a post on this I've drafted. I've not released it yet. I'll probably do it maybe next week if I get time, or whenever I get round to it. But we sort of looked through it, and at a high level, it's just two different problem sets. They were positing in their posts that, we don't need to have things like Azadism and all these manifestos and discussion of statecraft because it's already been done, right? And then they point to documents like Samvad document as examples of it. So then when we read through it, it was like, well, this isn't exact. The actual words they used was like exhaustive. I can't remember the word now. They use this phrase in their post, basically saying it's like an extensive, detailed account of how Sikh state should be run or something like that, right? And we read it, it's like it's nowhere near that. Like it's not even that wasn't even the point of it. It's actually, it has a completely different purpose. So these Neo-Khalistanis, like usual, have just completely missed the point of things, and just getting insecure for no reason. The Samvad document is 27 pages long. The Azadist manifesto is 277, right? The actual paperback version of it. So there's obviously a world of difference between extensiveness, and then also when you actually understand what the Samvad document is about. It's about how to. It's not even telling you how to do it. It's more of like a statement of intent and a call to action to get Databandiyas to come together and form decision making processes as a band for, again, internal decision making. mostly for like Sabbath Khalsa processes. And that's a very different problem set than the manifesto was trying to achieve. Where the manifesto was talking about, okay, how do you run a kind of nation state or a society or a system like that, led by Sikhi, right? And from that kind of angle of things. But clearly that wasn't the purpose of the Samvad document. These are two different problem sets being addressed here, and they've completely missed the point of that. And then they also reference a document called the Amritsar Declaration, and I think they've misnamed it because when I googled it, I couldn't find anything called the Amritsar Declaration that was relevant. What I think they've misquoted is actually the independence, the Declaration of Independence of Palestine, 1986. That is a document. And again, that isn't a extensive kind of like roadmap or vision of policy planning or anything like the Azad manifesto was doing. It was again a kind of statement of intent that we want a Palestine now. And again, these documents are fine. I mean, that's what the purpose were. That's great. That's what the purpose of them were. But they weren't the same. They weren't solving the same problem that I was trying to solve with the Azadist manifesto. So it was a false comparison, and they sort of missed that completely with those critiques. And I'll explain this in more detail next week or whenever I get around to posting that. But in a nutshell, it was a very embarrassing attempt at them to critique the Azadist manifesto and the Bunga's outputs, and they've ended up embarrassing themselves with it more so than everything. So yeah, I mean, lesson in that: if you want to critique us, do so in the right manner. We provide every avenue possible for you guys to critique us. Again, these Darbars are another example of us being open for critique. Just do so professionally, respectfully, and in a kind of like worthwhile manner. Otherwise, it's just pointless. It's just pointless social media mudslinging. Okay, so where can we find this critique? The critique can be found on their page, Jungi Awaz, on Instagram. I think they did 6 or 7 posts on us. But again, yeah, feel free to read through them. If you find them compelling, let me know, and then maybe I can address any concerns. But we did that session. It took about 2 hours to get through just their first post. It was that much level of nonsense in it. I mean, I mentioned this in our update as well. Like it was pretty impressive how much nonsense they were able to pack in just one post. So that's commendable in of itself. But if any Sangat is still want to hear our response to any of our arguments they've put forth, please let me know, and I can address those as well. If you think they've made a good point and I've missed it, just let me know, and then we can discuss it as well. Okay, cool. And then the proper critique. So the proper critique is it's on Sikhs in Court's Substack page. So let me see where it is. I'll post a remind me afterwards, and I'll post a link to it on the Azadism story, and I'll put it in the Discord now. Here it is. It's this one. It took a little while ago. Here it is, first rank. I'll put this in the chat and Discord, but just remind me, and then I can send it to you afterwards as well. Again, I really recommend Game Sing's views on things and following Sikhs in Court. It's very insightful. Okay, cool. So that was the Jungiwar stuff. The second thing was we collaborated with a page called Sabro Heritage, and they wrote a post for the Bunga to submit to the Bunga on the concept of so there's a concept in Azadism called Stanistan, if you're not familiar, and actually I'll show you our Vichaar repository where you can read more about this. Now, Stanistan is a very experimental concept, a kind of a long-term kind of vision of where Azadism would hopefully head. So if you took Azadism to its limits, and you really truly wanted a free society, what I've theorized is that you end up with something like this. You'd end up with the Stanistan model, and in a nutshell what it is, it's a method of organizing communities that aims to respect diversity and offer avenues in which people are able to establish their own experience in statecraft. So the idea is, right, if a bunch of communists come forward and say, oh no, we think Marxism, communism is best, and then a bunch of capitalists say, no, we think capitalism is best, we believe in free markets, or a bunch of like Singhs come forward and say, no, we need to replicate like a Prem Samaj type monarchy system. Now what Afghanistan does, instead of having what we have today, basically, is that these groups basically fight each other for control, and then they impose their system on everybody arbitrarily in the entire territory. What Stanistan says instead, okay, well, let's establish a marketplace for governance. Instead of having one system, let's have a system of systems. So if the communists think if you communists think your idea is best, or you capitalists think your idea is best, etc., then pool some funds, buy some land, set up small, and show us, right? And if it's successful, it will have the right pull factors to attract talent to your community that want to participate in it, and as a result, they'll bring their skills, their wealth, their knowledge, etc., and you can expand that settlement further. But if it doesn't provide a good quality of life, if those systems are truly broken, then people aren't going to want to live there, and then you'll probably see people moving out of that experiment, right? And that's the kind of way for the whole society kind of to learn and iterate actually as well what societies work, what policies actually work in reality, rather than just us all theorizing about it and then hoping for the best if we ever do a coup and get in charge. So this is kind of a way where you can live the way you sort of want to, because it doesn't have to be one winner either. It doesn't mean like just one system is right for everybody. In reality, because human beings are diverse, we might have many systems that work for many different types of people. Like what's appropriate for somebody in their retirement age is going to be different to what's appropriate for somebody in their, I don't know, teenage years. Somebody who might be looking for a stan, or a land or a city-state or a settlement or a commune to basically hunker down and enjoy their retirement with, right? Whereas other people might want to seek experiments and participate in stans that are more conducive towards building skills, getting education, or working in certain types of jobs or fields. Other people might want to move to a stan temporarily to have entertainment, right? This is what Disneyland effectively is, right? It's an entertainment stan and devoted to the task of entertaining people. So what Stanistan does is say, okay, well, instead of us as the government telling you what to do and how to live and what you prefer, you people as an individual, you know what's best for you. You and your local community do. So why don't you and your local community form yourselves a community and live how is best for you. The only restriction then on this is the non-aggression principle. So you're free to live however you want to, provided it does not impede the right for others to do the same. And that's where the Khalsa comes in my opinion. That's where the Khalsa's role should be, is to arbitrate disputes related to the non-aggression principle and put an end to injustices wherever the non-aggression principle is breached. So that's essentially what the Stanistan sort of is. And again, I'm sort of paraphrasing it a bit as well, and I've got more to write on this as well. I've been writing quite a bit on it in private over the last few months, and I know I keep mentioning it, but I need to complete it at some point. But that's the most comprehensive stuff at the moment in private I've got that is going to basically flesh out this Stanistan in detail and see how it sort of relates to nationalism, how it improves upon nationalism, which is the kind of world order we're living in today. And even I might include things like how you could apply it to things like Israel, Palestine, or Punjab, or Iran, etc. I'll see how I do that. But a lot of the focus of that piece is actually on missiles, and how the modernized missile system would work to actually arbitrate the disputes I'm talking about and enact justice, defend against foreign powers, do internal policing. I'll go through scenario analysis as well. If there's an axe murderer running around chopping people up, how would that be resolved in a kind of modernized missile system and Stanistan framework, right? How would you do that? How would prisons work? How would you get legal systems and courts without central government? All those things are going to be covered in that piece. But for now, if you visit the Stanistan section of the Vichaar repository on bungazaadi.com, you can sort of get the principles of what the Stanistan concept is and what it's trying to achieve. So as part of this, the Sablo Heritage Outpost guys reached out and they expressed interest in this kind of stuff, and then we had a call and basically they wrote a piece for the Bunga, sort of expanding on it. So this kind of building a network for stans as well, this kind of relates to some of the grand strategy stuff, so I won't go into too much detail, and I recommend reading this. But it becomes imperative now to start looking at examples around the world and looking at how other communities are also doing similar things to setting up stans in a decentralized manner already. And the examples the author of this piece gives is of the Latter-day Saints Church. I think they're called Mormons as well. yes, Mormons. So they've already got examples we can learn from as Sikh. Obviously, some of these are a bit cultish, right? And they've got their own issues. But there's all the more reason for us as Sikh to start learning from them and seeing what lessons we can draw. And maybe even then start to put together business plans and a strategy to how to even do some of these in real life, right? Because we're all moaning about trying to get Khalistan, but Khalistan's a nation state project, right? It's a very large scale thing. You have a lot of prep work to go into it, and you could do it. You could even get the nation state, but if you do it wrong, then you're not really succeeded in my eyes. Like for me, the success metric here isn't getting a nation state. The success metric here is having a successful nation state where it's prosperous and people are free and people can pursue mukti and peace, that kind of things. If it's just a Sikhi themed version of Pakistan or Hindustan, with the same sort of policies but with people with Bunga and Darbar in charge instead, like, that's not success in my eyes. It's just more stupidity, but with a Sikhi theme now. So what we really need to look at is actually what drives things to success, right? What communities are achieving success? What is the definition of success? And then how do we replicate it, or how do we improve upon it, adapt it? So examples like given in this piece is extremely important to study. So the Latter-day Saints here, and also the Shabbat community, I think it's a community of Jews in the US who've also gained a lot of soft power and influence through, again, just securing regions, creating states within states, all that kind of stuff. So look, as Trump surrounded by a room full of these Jews, it should be really a room full of Singhs surrounding them, and then giving them policy planning, that kind of stuff. So I mean, other communities are doing this stuff, and we can cry about it and say, oh, this community's doing that, and they're putting these policies in. But as I said before, if you're not playing the game, then don't complain you're not winning, right? You can't not participate and then complain you're not winning the game. So you have to play the game a bit. You got to understand the system, and then then you can change the system, sort of thing. Or you can butt heads against the system. But if you're going to do that, then you have to actually be competent at doing it. And I don't see the band as competent in that area yet. And if you do want to get competent in that hard power area, then again, this is what the whole Dalamgud pipeline stuff is about, trying to revive the hard power, trying to remilitarize the Khalsa a bit, but in a way that's in line with international law, within line with like ethical conventions, all this kind of stuff. Like the last thing we want is basically become my Sikh version of the Taliban. I don't think that's going to serve anyone's interests. I think it's going to make things a lot worse, and I think it's a stupid strategy, especially for today. Well, I think we should be striving for greatness. We shouldn't be some kind of like a band of like technologically inferior. We should be the most technologically advanced. We should be the most advanced armies on the planet. We should have the best technologies. We should be leading humanity in security, defense, and justice, not just playing catch up and doing some kind of unsophisticated methods. And something like this, the whole private military security company framework that I'm advocating for in the Dalamgud Pipeline white paper, is what I think is the route for the Khalsa today, if it wants to maintain those traditions. So again, it's up to us as a Bant, it's up to us as a Sangat. I mean, it's not even up to any of the Bantic orgs, to be honest. It's up to us as a Sangat to do this. So yeah, we are making progress with this actually as well. Had a meeting yesterday actually with some of the UK military guys to advance some of this stuff. So hopefully a couple of cool civic opportunities coming up soon to help us out with advancing the Dalamgud pipeline and doing some of this advocacy work to encourage more Sikhs to get into law enforcement and armed forces backgrounds, maybe in paramedics, that kind of stuff, and actually build out that whole economy and industry of Sikhs being in those roles that are actually conducive towards getting the competencies required to do statecraft on our own terms a bit later. And a lot of this, in the meeting yesterday, we raised a couple of these points. Like fundamentally what we're trying to do here is basically bring that Anaka back in amongst the Khalsa. Instead of being this kind of docile, like fake Nimrata thing and everything's hanji and you're bowing down to like Babbe who wearing white Jadara, we should actually recognise our status as the Guru Khalsa and have a bit of Anaka in that, right? And gain some self-respect. Because I feel like we've lost a lot of self-respect, and this is the reason why so many of our issues are issues in the first place. Because we're not taking personal responsibility and understanding the gift the Guru has given us of Gurgaddi as a Bant. And as a result of that misguidedness on our behalf, and basically taking this gift and throwing it in the mud, we're then suffering. And then we're wondering why we're suffering. But it's because you're constantly in this sheepish leader finding mode and not actually becoming your own leaders, and recognizing the gift the Guru has given you. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, and something that, again, this Dharamyud pipeline, fundamentally, that's what it's trying to do, is reshift that kind of thinking that we've spent 100 years now basically bowing around to like intermediaries and joining Dere and all these cults and stuff have arisen, and start actually being Khalsa again, being Singhs again. And obviously both sides, not just that gender thing either, it's like genuinely just have some self-respect as Sikh, and that's the main kind of underlying motivator behind things like this. And there's an example actually, probably worth giving at this point. So there's this great podcast series by a guy called Martyrmade, and he did it on, it's very extensive on the full history of the Israel and Palestine conflict. He has a pretty unbiased take from what I've seen so far in this space, and I've sort of like been sort of like both sides of the spectrum here, and moderated my views on the whole thing a lot due to this podcast I listened to a while back, and he goes through it all, like way back, like even like how Zionism sort of started, and the kind of like climate of the Arab world at the time, and the effect of nationalism on the psyche of all these people, and how each group sort of adapted to it, and the British sort of like screwing them over and that kind of stuff, right? So it's brilliant. I really recommend it. This podcast series by Martyrmade, right? And I'll send it in the chat if you guys remind me. I think I mentioned it in Discord a little while ago as well, talking about it. But yeah, if I got this right, so in Israel, their main international airport is named after a guy called Ben Gurion, I believe it is, and I might get this completely wrong. It's been a while since I've listened to the podcast. I might get the names wrong, but it's a guy called Ben Gurion, I think. And he got quite famous amongst the early Zionist movement because he kind of came in with this whole angle of, we don't just need a Jewish state, we need to basically revive the self-respect of the Jews. That we need to stop being all victims and have this victim narrative that we have all the time. And he really did a lot to reinvigorate the Jewish spirit, that kind of fueled the fire in the Zionist movement, that allowed them to achieve well, obviously relatively to them, successes that they went on to achieve with attaining a nation state. And I think if you look at it and sort of see the parallels between the early Zionist movement, and then you also compare the kind of Khalistan movement as it is today, there's a lot of parallels. Like you start seeing a lot of the same attitudes present in the early Zionists, in the same way there's different factions of Khalistanis. Like the same way you had like practical Zionists and like idealistic Zionists, and even like communist Zionists and stuff like that, right? The same sort of like factions we have in the Khalistanism kind of movement today, and it's like where the Jews were 100 years ago is about where we are now as Sikh. So we sort of continue the way we're going. The Khalistanis at least, you'll end up in a very similar situation where I don't know if we'll even achieve it this way, but if best case scenario that I can see, given the trajectory now, you'd end up with a Sikh version of Israel. Now, is that desirable? I'm not too sure. Obviously, Israel has its successes. It's turned deserts into like arable farming land and all this kind of stuff, and its technology industry, and it's done quite well relatively in the Middle East. But it also has its massive problems as well. Like, do we want a system like that? I'm not too sure I would like a Sikh version of Israel. But that's the kind of trajectory, and I think it's really important to like see the parallels here and trying to predict where things will head, given the way things are right now. And so again, this podcast here I recommend for that. But yeah, that's that stuff. So where else was I went off a bit of a tangent there. So yes, the actual document itself, so building global network of stance or soft power. So I highly recommend this. Anybody who's interested in Bunga Azaadi's or whatever the entity sits behind Bunga Azaadi, its grand strategy, then I recommend reading and understanding this article, and understand where it's coming from, and then also do additional things by looking at other communities, like even look at failed examples like Rajneeshpuram or Osho, right? These are all good relevant case studies we should be studying right now to prepare us for some of these later stages that we're considering in the grand strategy. So if you are interested in those things, this kind of article is related to that. So yeah, I recommend reading it. It's on the Substack as well, in one of the latest posts. And then obviously follow Sabo Heritage Outpost They're going to be doing some cool things coming up as well that I think would interest a lot of the audience of Bunga Azaadi, so definitely follow these guys. Okay, and then quickly pause for any questions or comments anyone wants to make. Hard times are coming. We can either have the energy and honor to deal with, or get canned and watch our families get canned. Yeah, to be honest, yeah, that is pretty bleak. And generally, as an individual, I prefer optimism. But you're right. I don't want to be like an irrational optimist. We're so blind to things. I think yeah, things can get quite tough. We have to stay prepared for it, especially with the technological revolutions, like things like AI and quantum computing and these kind of things coming up. We as a band have really got to start understanding where the trajectory of the planet is going towards, where human development is going towards, and then we've got to decide: do we want to basically lead the charge on those kind of things and shape the trajectory of human development, or do you want to continue playing catch up and have people decide on our behalf, which is what we did for the last century, right? With nation states and stuff. Now we're playing catch up with nation states. So are we going to miss the next opportunities and then again play catch up and then again let others decide on our band's behalf how we should be, or do we do it on our own sort of terms? Again, it goes back to that self-respect point. We can use the Truman Doctrine to spread and expand the influence of the Khalsa in developing countries. What are your thoughts on Operation Theseus? You're probably going to have to detail to me what Operation Theseus is, and also the Truman Doctrine. I'm not familiar with these kind of thing. Cool. I'll move on. I think the YouTube chat might have missed the boat with the submitting topics, but any chance could an overview of the private courts of law be done? I don't understand how impartiality is maintained. How would two parties agree on a court to use? Essentially, I might defer this actually because it's been a while since I've looked into this topic, and it's actually something I cover in the piece I mentioned earlier that I'm working on about Afghanistan and missiles and stuff in detail. There's a great book I recommend. It's not very long. It's basically just 2 essays put together by a guy called Robert Murphy or Bob Murphy. He seems to have 2 names, like a Khalsa. But he's a Mises Institute Austrian school economist, and he's wrote a book called Chaos Theory, in which he basically details how private law works. And it's actually one of the main bases in which the writings I'm doing right now are based off. And he outlines it quite nicely and gives actually examples of how it might work. So you actually have examples of this in real life already happening in international law and also corporate law. And both these examples are relevant because you don't actually have a higher authority in both those levels. Well, not necessarily you do. So especially in international law, you don't have like an international kind of body. It is, although there are organisations that claim to be those things, but truly there really isn't. So sometimes, especially in corporate law, what these kind of both disputing entities sort of realise is that it can be quite expensive to have long drawn out court battles that involve a government. So instead what they do is they go to private courts and to arbitrate disputes or like conflict resolution organisations, and they tend to be faster and cheaper to do. Obviously, if you get situations on a more like residential, personal level where somebody's obviously is his like brother-in-law or something is a judge or whatever, and you get into a dispute with someone, you're not going to go to that judge then, are you? You're going to refuse that court. So you probably have a competitive system of many courts of law, which are all competing in the same market to do this dispute arbitration work, and those courts of law basically would have to compete in the market by providing goods and services that people are willing to pay for, just like any other private entity does. But in this case, they have an additional incentive to maintain a high reputation. So if a court of law becomes known for being biased in certain cases, like let's say it's a divorce cases, right, and it's always taking the side of the woman, then nobody who's in disputes are going to choose that court because they've got a clear bias, right? So the court has a clear incentive to try and avoid biases and remain just, because that's how it gets its clients and customers. As soon as it gets outed, just like a restaurant would, right? If a restaurant gets caught out for being like unhygienic, no one wants to eat there anymore. Same way with the courts. If you get outed for being biased, no one's going to want to use that court for arbitrating disputes with. So again, the market would adjust, and other competitors will come in and outcompete that court. That the courts are with the poor outcomes would get filtered out, and the courts with the best outcomes are the ones that stay in the game. And it's those courts that expand. It's those courts that get competed against as well. And whenever those courts stop performing, then new entrants come into the market, new entrepreneurs come and they set up their own courts. Now, you might even get innovations in such a competitive environment. Things like you might get AI, train the AI to be like as unbiased as possible, give it all the case law, etc., and you get the AI to arbitrate the disputes. Now, it's ultimately up to both disputing parties to decide whether they want to adhere to the and agree to it. But again, that's sort of like how it sort of works. There's obviously such certain cases in which it gets a bit more complex. And this is things like murder cases. So if obviously the murderer, if he's clearly guilty, he's going to refuse every single court to go to if he wants to maintain his I'm not going to jail for killing that guy kind of thing. But if you've attempted every single court in all the facility around you and all the localities and stuff like that, right, and all the judges rule in your favour, well then effectively you can just send a PMC after the guy and no one's going to really complain right at that point. And then essentially what happens today, instead of what happens today, right, is that you don't get any choice in the court or justice system. You get to use the government decides on your behalf. So when the central government's judicial system gets corrupted, then you're all screwed basically. There's no mechanism in which to have them be outcompeted. Same thing like with the police. If the police do a bad job, it's not like I can go and say, well, I'm not paying my taxes to that police force anymore, I'm going to hire my own private security. No, you're forced to pay your taxes to the police regardless of its performance, and this is in part, in my opinion, why a lot of state police forces are substandard today. It's because they again getting paid for regardless of performance. So if they do anything messed up, the police don't go out of business. They're paid for regardless, again through taxes or via inflation. And the same thing again with the courts. If a court does a bad job, it's not like the UK or the US legal system goes out of business. No, it carries on, and that's the issue. The bad outcomes aren't getting filtered out. So the basis on this private law system is you want to filter out bad outcomes and keep in good outcomes and let the good outcomes compete. And innovate further and provide the best outcomes. Again, it's a bit abstract, sort of explaining it like this. It probably needs diagrams and a time to digest. And it also does need a kind of appreciation of some of the more fundamental economic concepts that the Azaadis manifesto goes through. So things like monopoly formation is crucial to understand before even attempting to understand more the anarchistic experimental ideas of Azaadism and Istanistan and stuff. Like if you haven't got kind of your understanding kind of like on lock with the things like regulations, lobbying, corporate political activity, monopoly formation, price controls, then a lot of this ain't going to really make sense. It's going to seem a bit out there. But it's only when you have those foundations and principles built and then you keep logically deducing from there, then you start, oh yeah, that makes sense now. So you have to do that work, and it's hard to do that now. Like me explaining it, it takes time. So again, this is the reason why there's so many misconceptions, because people don't want to put the time in and the effort in to actually get the fundamentals right, and they'll jump to the statecraft, the politics, without the economic underpinnings. And I say this as well. I said this since the start of the project. Economics is way more important than politics. If you don't have your basic understanding in economics, politics is absolutely pointless, and actually, in my opinion, you probably should avoid it, because you're more risking, you got a higher risk of actually implementing policies and advocating for politics that are actually detrimental. They sound good on the surface, but because you don't have the economic understanding to understand how the consequences of these decisions can materialize, then you basically screw yourself over without even realizing it, or you might screw over the next generation or large scale populations. So again, economics is important because it gives you that appreciation. Okay, cool. So there's that, and then next thing I wanted to cover was oh yeah, actually, Mike, just continuing off this. So last Darbar, I mentioned we started a kind of Sikh Spaces project, and this is still active. We are looking for people to want to contribute to this. So I'm going to quickly go over it again, if you guys are interested as well. So before we get to this sort of stan level, if we're doing like larger scale stan projects, there's this concept of small scale stans as well. And this is basically things like institutions, buildings, that kind of stuff. Like essentially what kind of like, again, the Shafar community and stuff are doing. In fact, even this Vichaar probably might fit better into the small scale stans category. Might have to change that later. So one example of a small scale stan is a Sikh space. So Sikh space is a catch-all term for all types of Sikh spaces, including Gurdwara, but also things like Shaunis, Dharamsals, Statecraft, Bunga. Like technically, this Bunga as well is a Sikh space, mostly a digital one, and a Kare as well, example of a Sikh space, and a Takht as well is a Sikh space, right? So we went through and we identified these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 types of Sikh spaces. If you know of any others, let us know. But I think this probably covers it all, or at least they all should come under one of these kind of categories and labels. Now, I think the most fundamental building block of a Sikh space should be a Shawnee, and this is basically just quite simply a plot of land. It doesn't need any physical structures or permanent structures there. It can just be literally just a field, and you're good to go. And on that field, the khas or Singhs or Sangat, etc., can set up like organic farming. They can do like tents and like little camping activities, whatever. Get together once a month to do a Darbar, come together on that land and do part, that kind of stuff. That you can set that up as a sovereign Sikh space, or a lot sovereign, right? So these are the most fundamental things that everyone wants to sort of like jump towards setting up a Gurdwara straight away. But really, you should set up something like a Shawnee first, and prove your concept, right? If you can provide activities and stuff and an environment in which Sangat want to go to, then that's your success metric, right? You might start in the first year thinking, okay, well, I'm going to buy this field, I'm going to set up a little organic farm here, and we're going to do like Bart here as well once a week. We're going to like do Panprakash, Ithas, like that kind of stuff. And then you attract Sangat, right? And then the Sangat might want, okay, well, it gets cold here, right? Can we set up some tents? And then you invest with the Sangat money, pool money together, you buy a couple of tents, right? Some firewood, and you sit around the fire and do it, right? Nice and cozy, right? And then more Sangat might want to come and join you, and then that's your kind of, again, you're attracting them, right? And at that point, you have more talent, more resources available to you. So then you might want to decide, okay, cool, let's actually set up some permanent structures here. And then at that point, you can transition from a Shawnee to a Dharamsal, and this is basically just any kind of like spiritual space or permanent structure devoted towards like Dharam, essentially, right? And before Gurdwara, like during the Guru's times and stuff, this is what Sikh spaces were called. They were called Dharamsals. The Gurdwara came a bit later. A lot of Dharamsals were renamed into Gurdwara. But really, I think we should go back to this Dharamsal concept. Like, you don't need a Maharaj Sarup there or all these kind of like rates and whatever. Like, keep it flexible. Like, you can even just buy like a building in a town centre somewhere and just set up meditation classes for people, bring people in and then give them a bit of like Sikhi leaflets, that kind of stuff, soft Vichaar. Again, there's so much flexibility with thinking about Sikh spaces in this way, strategically as well. I think we make a mistake by just jumping towards, buying an old factory building, half refurbishing it, still got leaky taps or whatever, poor decor, and then putting a plastic balki in there for a surup you printed out from China. Like, it's embarrassing if you're going to go around calling, oh, the Guru is the King of Kings, and then you go to the actual Gurdwara where the King of Kings is meant to be residing, and they're there on a plastic balki. Like, what the hell is that? Like, are you just giving the lip service? Do you actually consider this to be the King of the Kings? So instead of actually jumping towards it, Gurdwara, then if you can't maintain the standards, and I've given a list of minimum standards as well. The SAS standard, right? It has to have security, 24/7 security detail, like world leaders do, like high elite close protection officers. If it doesn't have that, you should not have a Gurdwara, right? If you can't protect the Sangat and you can't protect the Guru Granth Sahib Sarup, you should not have a Gurdwara. Simple as that in my mind. Second is aesthetic. If you can't guarantee the Gurdwara to look as objectively beautiful as possible, hiring the best architects that actually is most awe-inspiring. The Gurdwara should be the most prominent building in the entire region. The same way how the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul Like when you think of Istanbul, you think of the skyline of Istanbul, you instantly think of the Hagia Sophia. That's what a Gurdwara should be like. So if I think of Leicester, I should be thinking of the Gurdwara at Leicester, but I don't, right? So that's the issue. So we need to make them extremely prominent, the same way Harmandir Sahib is in Amritsar, right? Amritsar is known for Harmandir Sahib. That's how prominent Gurdwara should be, minimum. And then Sarup, right? So the Sarup should be handwritten, in my opinion. It should be Ladivar, and it should match the spelling and include all the characters and sections of at least one of the Prath and Bs. If we can't do that, again, a bit of a radical position, but I just don't consider it to be a Sargun Sarup of Guru Granth Sahib. I consider it to be a Gotka Sahib instead. And that takes out a lot of the philosophical power committees seem to think they have by having a Guru Granth Sahib Sarup, or what they perceive to be one. And then they go around blackmailing the Sangat around them, saying, oh, you've got to pay your daswan to us, otherwise the Gurdwara is going to shut down. Well, no one asked you to build that Gurdwara in this old, dilapidated factory building. Why are you now emotionally blackmailing everyone around you to pay up for your langar that you can't afford? Maybe you should have started smaller with something like a Shoni, proved your concept, provided value to the Sangat. The Sangat would want to voluntarily help you, and then you wouldn't be in such a stupid situation now where you're begging everyone for money to keep your Gurdwara going, right? It's just common sense. Like, why are we just jumping towards like this middle thing when we should be starting small and then scaling up? It's just, again, it's just common sense. All right, and then the additional auxiliary things, right? So like a bunga doesn't have to exist in a physical space like ours doesn't really. What we use is basically spaces as and when needed. So if we need to go to a Gurdwara to do an event, then we just use the space there, or maybe even a non-Gurdwara space, etc. But you can also have a bunga inside a permanent structure. A bunga is part of a Shoni, part of a Gurdwara, part of a Shastragar, etc. And a Kara as well, a space for learning combat and martial arts. So I mean, I've broadened the definition of Akara in this thing here, and I think Akara should include gyms, martial art academies, shooting ranges, gun clubs, and hunting lodges. It should be anything that increases martial activity, in my opinion, can be classed as an Akara. And again, it can be part of another structure, or it can be its own independent entity as well. And in fact, I think it might be quite strategic that all these towns and cities that have like 15 Gurdwara in them, shut them all down, keep just one of them maybe, and then all the rest of them turning into actually useful, profitable enterprises. So set up a gym that attracts both Sikhs and non-Sikhs to go to that gym, and then you basically do soft propaganda, like have like Sikhi leaflets there, you paint the walls with shaheeds, that kind of stuff, right? So the non-Sikhs are coming, they're going to get curious, then you can ask them, right? And then if they're interested in actually visiting a Gurdwara, then all the kind of like profits and stuff you're making are going towards this one central kind of Gurdwara actually that can be of high quality and actually match the standards, rather than having 15 based on like caste or your dera or whatever, right? But again, that's a bit of a difficult task to do given to how much sort of like tribalism has arisen. But again, if we start redefining what constitutes a Gurdwara to begin with, then to be honest, right now I can't name one Gurdwara in the UK. I can name many dharamsalas now as per these standards, but where the Gurdwara, there won't be any. Right, so again, it's about radically reshifting, and this comes from the Sangat first, right? The Sangat can go upwards rather than doing a top-down thing. Okay, and then the last one is Takht. So again, I mentioned this I think last time as well, and these are basically Khalsa political buildings. I don't think this kind of idea of having these Banch Takht as these kind of like, I just don't think it's useful anymore. I think they're defunct. So the same way Guru Gobind Singh Ji sort of realised how defunct and dysfunctional and even degenerate the Masan system became, even though it was set up by the previous gurus. The Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj was like, no, let's get rid of it now, let's bring in the Khalsa in a better system. And I think the same thing. I don't really see what use a lot of these Dakhs do. I think in some cases they're detrimental, and I think it's actually a weird kind of Sikh Catholicism is arising amongst the Sikhs, where they're turning some of these Dakhs into our kind of stand-in for the Pope at the Vatican. I think it's just complete stupid. I think a Takht is what is basically written in Bantarkash, where wherever a Singh plants his foot, they establish their own Takht there and then, right? That's what a Takht should be. So in my reimagining, I believe Dakhs now today, there should be things like Khalsa embassies, conflict resolution platforms, Sabbath Khalsa meeting points, for like various modern day missiles to come together and coordinate strategy and keep themselves accountable, debate, arbitrate disputes, strategize for the next 6 months, that kind of stuff, right? Or Khalsa embassies, places in which you have highly qualified Sikhs out of the Sangat, pay them very well to basically represent Sikhs in the kind of like foreign governments and stuff we live under. So they should be doing lobbying activity. They should be getting the promising Sikhs into parliament, into positions of influence, etc. And basically doing what those Jews were doing, where they basically formed the right relationships with the people in power to get what they want, right, to serve their interests. So again, this should be what we should be doing. I mean, let's forget about this kind of like blind kind of attachment to things that aren't working, nor even were even that actually they stopped working even during the Guru's times, right? So it's a stupid kind of attachment to traditionalism for the sake of traditionalism, with all kind of like pragmatism thrown out the window, and I don't think that's conducive to anything. Okay, so there's that. And I'll quickly go on to the next point, which is about... oh yes, so another member of the Bunga, Justice Singh Nahang, he published this actually a while back. Oops, there it is, yeah, capital punishment. But we updated it recently with a couple more Sakhis and just reworded parts of it, so I recommend reading through it. It's actually about whether capital punishment would be considered valid, or how exactly you'd go about doing it if you do want it, the pros and cons, different Itihas examples. It's a very comprehensive piece on capital punishment from a Khalsa perspective, and also applying it to how it might work within Azadism. So the guy who questioned earlier about private courts of law, how they might work, they've actually just things written about it a bit in this section as well. Giving you a bit of a idea of it as well. So I would definitely recommend reading through this. It's a very brilliant piece. It's one of the first actual outputs by Bunga members when we first set up the Bunga. So it was a great honour to revisit this and add it back to the new Vichaar repository we have now at bungazaadi.com. So I highly recommend reading through this. Again, look, right, we're doing the Vichaars we're meant to be doing. We're not doing the Vichaars related to like, whether we should be wearing like a shara in the shower or not. We're talking about how like legal systems work in a Khalsa-led society. That's where the Khalsa should be thinking, not those kind of stupid questions. So if that's what you're interested in, whether you need to wear kashara or not in the shower, then this is not the space for you, right? Go somewhere else. But if you're interested in statecraft and Sikhi, and applying, and basically honouring the legacy of the Anandpur Darbar, and that's what we're interested in, and that's what we're trying to do. And the space is for you. So if you want to contribute and you want to collaborate with us as an independent or as part of the Bunga, however you want to do it, right? What the Bunga is trying to do is offer you guys a platform. We're trying to archive this for the next generation of Sikh statecrafters. Okay, there's that one, and then yeah, I'll pause for questions and stuff. So any questions on any of this stuff so far? Any thoughts you want to give? Let me know, and I'll read them out or answer them. So there's been quite a bit of talking going on in the YouTube chat, so I'll read through some of this. Okay, cool. So, so Ruben's just giving his perspective on the private courts of law stuff. There would have to be concept of jurisdiction between these Stanistans, so that means there's a concept of borders of authority. So imagine a similar way between nation states now means overarching. Yeah, there would be jurisdiction. So each Stan essentially is a jurisdiction. I mean, it probably just synonymous in understanding. Hence the word, the whole nomenclature of Stan is Stan instead of like Pakistan or Hindustan, like land of the Hindus, whatever, right? We're saying no, land of lands, Stan is Stan. So each land obviously is referring to a jurisdiction. So you might have like a city-state that says, okay, well, instead of having a everybody in the city-state in our residence sort of like picking and choosing their own legal systems, we'll just have one legal system for our city-state. So if you want to apply to move to the city-state, then you apply to our legal system that we're setting up. So again, a bunch of like Sharia Muslims in this sort of situation, instead of them trying to like capture the entire system, instead you give them a bit of an outlet and say, okay, look, here's an opportunity, here's a bit of land, go over there, set your little Sharia thing up, have your Sharia courts, and let's see how it works in real life. Like, does it actually attract people to move there? And in my opinion, I don't think a lot of people would want to live in such a system. So I wouldn't see that Stan expanding very far or even lasting that long. But again, I'm open to be proven wrong on that. And in theory, all these pro-Sharia Muslims or communists and capitalists, all these groups, right? If they want to try their thing, then they should become Azadis first because Azaadis were allowed to try it, right? And then they also have to suffer the consequences of their decision making, and that's ultimately what a lot of this is all about. I want people to feel the effects of their decision making, because by doing so you learn, right? And isn't that what Sikhi is all about? Learning, right? So if you allow people to learn, then they can iterate, they can fail fast, right? And then once they fail, they learn the lessons and say, oh, well, that didn't work, let me try something else this time. Now, I don't want them to fail in such a way where it's so debilitating they can never try again. Hence why we have these kind of safety nets and stuff we advocate for in the manifesto. But we do want people to fail. So because in failure, you learn, and with better learning, you're then more likely to get better success. And with the success, that helps everybody. But you can't get success without trial and error. Okay, cool. So I'll skip through this. The government exists for a reason. You can't open market everything. Essential things require regulation to stop abuse. Debatable. I guess in the short term, yes, to some degree. I think it's also quite important to make a distinction between regulations and laws. Actually, have I added it in here? No, I haven't added it in. So there's another Vichaar I have, and it's actually sourced from Yaron Brook. He's an objectivist. Part of the, I think it's no longer part of it now, but he's the chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute. So the objectivists have a good argument on this, where they make a distinction between laws and regulations. And essentially what Azaadism sort of like mimics their position, that we're pretty against regulations, like the micromanagement on behalf of the state and how exactly like private entities should operate. And instead we just prefer a more simpler system of laws, and that's why I set the law as a non-aggression principle and say all law should be based on the non-aggression principle. Again, which means you're free to live however you want to live, provided you do not impede the right for others to do the same. Now, if you can do a law system based on that, then all these victimless crimes, like if you, I don't know, like consume marijuana, like that's a victimless crime. It's only you yourself being affected by that. Obviously, if you're affecting somebody else, then that's a different thing. But in the vast majority of the cases, you're not actually affecting anyone but yourself. You're a grown adult. You can decide for yourself. Why the hell is the government getting involved? It's not your parent. Especially as Sikh, right? We should never consider the state our parent. We already have parents, right? It's Guru Gobind Singh Ji and Tan Mata said there, so why the hell are we making the state and government our parent in its place? It's disrespectful. So yeah, I mean, I think if you have a system of laws and a good justice system in which you can enforce those laws, you don't need much regulation, if any regulations at all. Again, there's a section in the Azaad's manifesto on regulations. So if you go to Azaad Namma, Azaad's manifesto, and then section 3, I believe it is. Yes, there is a section on regulations. So I talk about regulations and how you can do private regulations. So regulations not done by the government, but done by the people themselves directly. So again, the Azaad's manifesto has covered a lot of these things. I recommend reading it. And unlike the neo-Khalistanis who don't read it and they just assume, you might get, especially if you read the manifesto in order, you've got a good solid foundation. Obviously I'm biased because I wrote the thing and I want people to read it, but I'm biased for good reason, because it gives us a good foundation to have some of the more advanced conversations, especially related to like private courts of law, like how private can we make it, how free can we make society, how little can we make government, and then can we even get rid of government entirely, like a central taxing authority is what I'm defining as government. And that's where I think the fun conversations are, but I don't think enough of us can have those conversations just yet. What could be general examples of AI tools Band should develop, like an encyclopedia of Gurmukhi, which is graphically animated and dynamic enough for new age users to interact? That'd be really cool. That'd be very cool. Like if like a Mahan Ghosh, but you can like basically generate like images for each entry. That'd be really cool. The issue with a lot of the AI image generation for Sikhi related things is that I don't think there's enough training data available. So it's getting quite difficult to generate quality images related to Sikhi. Like I always had an idea of but I like that Ratan Singh Pangu's Band Prakash, where an AI could generate a kind of Indian miniature painting style, obviously painting for each episode, relaying the events in it. But I can't get. Well, last time I tried it, at least I don't know if it's advanced recently, and some of the things were pretty cool. But I don't know if you can generate Indian miniature Mughal style paintings in those styles yet with AI. I don't know if there's enough training data on it, or maybe that's probably a project for us lot to actually make our own models that train on existing miniature paintings, and let's see if we can generate more based on prompts we give it. That'd be a very cool project, and then you can actually have pictured versions of like the Itihasic grants, like Suraj Prakash especially. You can have like lots and lots of cool paintings for like every episode, every chapter, or Saki, etc. Right, it'd be very cool. There's a lot here, right? But we as a band, we need to get into these spaces and start innovating. I was also speaking to someone else recently about if Maharaj Anandpur Darbar would be around today. I don't think it would be like a kind of like a publication house, like how we sort of had it back in the day. Like it's effectively a kind of publication house, with bringing in grants and transcreating them, etc., translating them or whatever. I think what they would have done, if it was around today, would actually become like a Sikh version of Hollywood and made like TV shows and movies, because that is probably what people today connect most with. Like barely anyone reads books anymore, right? But everyone watches TV shows and movies in comparison. And that's probably the best meat. I mean, you get some great movies and TV shows as well. Like I always use the Lord of the Rings example. Like you can pack a lot of meaning and truth into these kind of like modern day mythologies, and they can become culture defining. Like Harry Potter is culture defining, Lord of the Rings is culture defining. Like even some of the Batman movies, they're culture defining. They shape their kind of like culture of things. Like it's referenced in memes, it's referenced in like popular culture, whatever, right? So that's the same thing. A lot of these kind of grants being translated in Anandpur were doing to the Sikh culture at the time, the Sikh civilization. It was changing the psyche of the Sikhs, the mindset of the Sikhs, and informing them, giving them the inspiration to go on and then do Raj. In a similar manner, we should be leveraging like the best directors and writers, etc., and establishing our own kind of Sikh movie and TV show industry. Like the Game of Thrones stuff, right? Like the Game of Thrones TV show was brilliant, obviously, sans the kind of like last couple of seasons, but the production value was amazing. Like the way they could portray and spend so much time with all these different characters, and the plot lines and the Machiavellian archetypes and the existential threats with the zombie thing, right? It's sick. It's really good how they did that. And I was like, why can't we as Sikhs do something similar, create a Game of Thrones production value type thing for like, I don't know, like the fall of the Sikh Empire, or even like Jandi Diwar in a 300 style. Like there's so much of this stuff we should be doing. We just don't have the skills and we don't prioritize it. But hopefully by us inspiring especially the youth to start considering these things and recognizing the value in it, in the next few generations they might actually start delving into it. This last couple of generations I think was just trying to resettle in the West as a result of like doing this exodus from Punjab. So a lot of the diaspora was focused on actually safe careers, make money, get solid. But once we become a bit more wealthy as a band, a bit more comfortable, and have a bit more of a support system within ourselves as well, then we can probably take more risks and do that kind of stuff. So in the Jewish community, something I heard was they have a very good, healthy relationship with money, obviously, right? And the way, like if somebody elderly in your family sort of dies, if you're a Jew, right, then it's not uncommon for you to get a big payout, because obviously they inherit the wealth down through trust funds or whatever. So it kind of formed like a kind of safety net for Jewish youngsters, especially, to then have a kind of to then take risks and do things like investments, start businesses, entrepreneurship, that kind of thing, because they know they've got this kind of like financial safety net to fall back on if things go wrong. But we as Sikh really don't have that much of that, and I think that's something we should strive towards creating as a culture like that, and setting up ourselves like wills and trusts and that kind of stuff, so it doesn't get all like robbed by the government. Inheritance tax is actual grave robbery as well, but again, separate point. But yeah, so why did I mention that? I can't remember. So I guess we'll move on. So what other questions did we have? So courts are needed. Yes, courts are 100% needed. Whether or not they need to be provided by the government or not is a separate question. Okay, ChatGPT sharps. Think is lowest score. Appreciate it. Hence 50 degree choices for Yeah, PPE degree of choice for politicians. Yes. Yeah, we should get more things there. I think Bajra Singh actually did PPE at Oxford as well. Philosophy, politics, and economics, I believe it is. I think there's another one called politics, philosophy, and law as well. There's a couple of these quite cool degrees that are worth. I think are probably worth a lot. Especially getting scholarships done. So if, like young Sikh prodigies who show promise, finance them and say, okay, go do this degree at this top institution, and then just sign a pledge that after you've done that, the kind of knowledge and skills you gain, you help serve the band. These are things we can do. Instead of wasting all this money doing flipping public morning sessions in 1984 rallies every year, we basically drop how many tens of thousands on coach companies and Godwara Gorlocks or whatever to basically cry to ourselves when no one else cares. Instead, use that money to actually finance young Sikhs to go through the top institutions, gain skills that can actually benefit the band on a real level. Someone else was telling me as well, like Nagar Kirtan in like Canada or the US or something, right? They do a Nagar Kirtan and it costs like 2 million or something. And I was like, what a flipping waste that is. Like, it's insane the amount of money being wasted. Just like self-serving ourselves with actually getting nothing out of it. Like, it's crazy. So it's like that money can be used so much more productively. But I say that, but if I want the money to use more productively, then I have to produce a business plan or a pitch that people are willing to put their money in, right? It's easy to say, oh, money could be done this way or that way, but it's hard to actually produce a kind of viable plan with details and stuff to actually encourage people. And hopefully some of our next phase work will actually be related to this kind of stuff, so I won't mention more on it now. Okay, so next is, can you recommend some documentaries available online that one can go through before participating in the discussions? Yeah, very good question. In fact, it probably might be worth messaging me on Discord or afterwards. In fact, somebody remind me of this because I've got a list somewhere, and I'll produce a kind of like kind of playlist or something, or a link where you can just go through like articles or podcasts and lectures and videos, especially lectures. I have a lot of lectures. I've got a lectures folder on my YouTube somewhere as well, so I can send you these. I very, very recommend Milton Friedman's Free to Choose series, 10-part series, all available on YouTube. Brilliant. I don't agree with Milton Friedman and everything, but his foundations that he sort of sets out in those documentary series are brilliant, and I recommend everyone to watch them. I think it was produced in the 1990s, so it's a little bit outdated in terms of production value, but the actual gyan in it is more relevant today than ever before. I highly recommend everyone to watch it. And then after that, watch the actual Free to Choose lecture series that the TV show was based off. Very, very good. And then there's a couple of other things as well I would recommend. But remind me, and then I'll post a link in the Discord or on Instagram. On the courts topic earlier, isn't the market approach taken by police leaders being appointed or removed from positions, such as current Trump and Department of yes, kind of. But again, it's the same sort of underlying structure. There's very little room for innovation by doing that. You can fire the person, but the system is the issue. It's not necessarily the person. Yes, and the reality is, right, a lot of the cops don't actually get fired. They get protected. They have a lot of tribal mentality amongst themselves. And I don't really blame them for it as well, because it's extremely stressful jobs. And the kind of type of things they sort of deal with and experience, like an average civilian won't sort of like be able to handle that. And I know that because the police officers aren't able to handle that, like the mental health rates, all this kind of stuff. They just can't handle it. It's like going through like war zones. It's like even worse than war zones in some situations, right? So they start becoming quite insular and tribal. A lot of these police guys, so they don't actually end up firing each other, but they want each other on like suspended leave or whatever, or brush it under the carpet. So a lot of that sort of happens. And yes, you can change out police chiefs and all this kind of stuff. But I really recommend watching a TV show called The Wire. It's a really good show. One of the actual my friends actually recommended this to me a while back. Brilliant TV show, and it shows you the kind of like realities of the system in I think, where was it, Chicago? I think it was Chicago. I can't remember. It's like some gang. It's really, I really recommend watching The Wire, and it shows you the kind of like inner workings of the system in the government with this kind of things. Even Obama actually said it was the best TV show he ever watched. So yeah, I'd recommend that TV show and watching that, because it shows the reality of when you, it's not a certain element. It's not the people. It's the system that's like the issue. And when the system can't change, even though the actual kind of like pawns and who are playing out in this system can change, but when you have a truly market approach, you can have fundamental reshifts in how you approach the problem. And you see this in examples like South Africa. So the actual state function of providing policing has failed the citizenry a lot. So the citizens themselves are actually preferring to use private security companies to provide policing functions and patrols and stuff on their behalf. And they vastly outcompete and outperform the state-provided services. So yeah, it's a very good question. But I don't think the accountability in the government is strong enough to breed innovation and resolve issues as is available in the market. So, would it be more efficient? So wouldn't this be more efficient than a true market approach, which would require direct decision making by constituents? So the efficiency point it boils down to this, right? How you are paid, because how you're paid determines how much you can continue. So with the government, because you're paid regardless of performance, you can carry on continuing without actually having much incentive to change how you operate. But with a private market approach, it has to be more efficient, because if you're not efficient, if you're not generating more income than your outgoings, the same way if an animal spent more energy trying to find food than it got from the food that it ate, it would end up dying and getting filtered out in natural selection. Same thing happens in the market, right? The natural selection that happens in market forces can filter out the inefficient and remain only the ones who are efficient, right? So it really boils down to what is the definition of efficiency, and which model is better conducive to the incentives required to be efficient. Now, if you're paid for regardless of performance, i.e. via taxes, I don't think that's the best incentive structure to remain efficient. Versus if you are paid dependent on your performance, then you're going to have to be efficient, otherwise you're dead. Well, not dead, but like obviously you're filtered out the market, right? And then the people who can be more efficient, then those resources are freed up in the economy to then be used by new entrepreneurs to use those resources, right? So if a business, so like people sort of think like, oh yeah, if a business goes down, it sort of like pops out of existence. Like the same labour's there, the same building is there. It's just like the person who's administrating it has proven their inability to govern those resources. So now those resources are now freed up for somebody else to come in and to use, and that's what entrepreneurs are. They're people who come in and look at problems and try to solve the problems. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers. So they take those resources, they take the people who were fired from the previous role, often at a discounted rate, and then they create profit from that if they're successful. If not, then another entrepreneur comes in and does it better, right? And through that competitive environment, you tend towards efficiency, versus a government environment where everything's central planned and the government owns everything. Then you don't get much efficiency, you don't get much innovation. You get the bad outcomes. And again, it's a kind of like lesson of the 20th century. This is what happened. It was a battle between the central planned economies versus the market economies, and the market economies won out. So another question was, only moral truth in atheistic worldview is rabid Darwinism. Oh, sorry, a question above was, Agal, how can you say something is disrespectful when you, if I'm correct, do not believe in a true objective moral system? Very good, because I'm saying it subjectively. Look, this is quite a good topic. I don't believe in objective morality in the sense that something is objectively good and something is objectively bad. I think that's all subjective. The same way I don't believe that anything is objectively hot and something is objectively cold. These are dualities. And I think the point of Sikhi is to become transcendent of duality and recognize that actually the duality is the illusion. It's all just one equal God. It's all non-duality. So if we're consistent with that, then we have to also reject the dualities of ethics, obviously as related to good and bad or right and wrong. So if I'm saying something like, oh, something is disrespectful, I'm speaking from an egocentric perspective. I'm speaking from me playing within duality. Obviously, nothing is truly disrespectful, like in an ultimate sense. The same way how nothing is truly respectful in an ultimate sense. It's all just Maharaj themselves playing the kill with themselves, right? They themselves are the dush, they themselves are the heroes fighting and killing the dush, right? Maharaj himself comes as Ram, Maharaj himself comes as Ravan. It's all the same thing. But me, whilst operating in duality and as an egotistical being, I call things disrespectful because I am operating with an ego, right? I'm creating differences from my locality, from my perspective, with the other in order to orient myself into reality, right? If I didn't do that, then I probably would get a bit be a bit of a weird, and then and just not eat anything or recognize a predator from prey, all that kind of stuff. So it's evolutionary why we behave like this. But I guess the goal of meditation, goal of Simran, is to recognize that core fundamental truth of that oneness, even if it's just temporary. Ultimately, I guess that's what mukti is, right? Trying to achieve that state of non-duality where you rise above. Even me saying that, right, rising above or transcending, like there's no above or below either, right? So even that's dualistic in the way to speak it. So like when I've seen Japji Sahib and Maharaj talks about like it's quite difficult to explain, right? It's like chewing steel or whatever. It's truly true. Like this language sort of fails at the point when you start to describe non-duality. Like therefore, if I can't sustain the conversation at that level, I have to remain dualistic, especially when I'm talking about dualistic things like economies and statecraft or whatever. So yeah, it was a very good objection, Dashant Singh. So yeah, kind of threw me off. Would you concede your ethical views to simply be arbitrary and your views and you find good and views you find good and so endorse simply because your belief that it is good? Yes, 100%. It is my belief, and that's why I'm open to debate and disagreement. So if you can prove my beliefs wrong, prove them wrong, because I want the better idea. So I'm not attached to any of the beliefs. The beliefs are here to be used and utilized and discarded if no longer useful. So again, this is the point of having these darbars, having disagreements and debate and seeking them out. Because all of this, the whole Vichaar repository, anything I wrote in here is up for debate, questioning, and better ideas coming in and replacing them. So yeah, brilliant line of question in there, Shansi. And then I think other things goes, only moral truth in atheistic worldview is rabid Darwinism. Yeah, I suppose so. Maybe that's why I'm a bit of a, that's why I'm kind of like my Darwinism in the Azaadism kind of concepts. How can a modern day system be implemented in a military role and government role? Very good question. So, a modern day missile system, so I define a modern day missile as a service provider for security. Now, I consider that should be private, either so based on a voluntary payment basis rather than a tax basis. And my distinction between private and public is dependent on taxes. So if you're acquiring funds to sustain your project or enterprise in an involuntary manner via involuntary payments, you are a state, you're a government, right? You're no difference to a nation state and the governments we have today. But if you're operating in a voluntary manner where nobody is forced to participate in your project or enterprise and no one is forced to interact with you if they don't want to, or transact with you, then you're a private entity, right? The same way how Langars operate. Langars are voluntary private enterprises, right? Nobody is forced to participate in them. It's all based on voluntary action. So that's how I believe a modern day missile system should operate. So if you look at modern day examples of this, where do we see examples of companies or organizations or communities? A company is just simply a community, right? A highly focused community. Where do we see those in real life that are operating on a voluntary basis rather than a tax basis? Well, we see that with private military security companies or private law firms. These don't operate on taxes. If you don't want their services, you don't pay them, right? If you're their client and then they stop performing, you can say, well, I don't want to be your client anymore and I want to choose another service provider. That is the most moral way, in my opinion, to operate a modern day missile system. I think it should be on a disfund or voluntary payment basis, not a tax basis or an involuntary payment basis. And it also does not need to be tied to any jurisdiction or territory. I believe it should be tied to your client, right? So if your client is a family who lives in a particular neighborhood and they want patrol services from you, then that's your jurisdiction to defend that family. Now you might coexist with many missiles in the same locality or area, and for me that's a way better way to do it, because the last time we tried missiles we started fighting each other on basis of territory and jurisdiction and tax rights. Whereas this kind of resolves the problem and say, well, no, you're just companies. Like the same way how, I don't know, like Walmart doesn't go to war with Amazon because it's not good for business. The same way the missiles wouldn't tend to go war with each other because it's a high resource intensive thing. You'll ruin your market reputation. You won't get more clients. You won't be able to raise any more voluntary payments. banks might boycott you, insurance companies aren't going to show other things, and even the actual own members of the missiles themselves aren't going to say, well, I don't want to go join that missile, they're at war with this missile for a stupid reason, and I want to fight for that, right? I'd rather just not die for a stupid thing. I'd rather just go set my own missile up or go join that missile over there who is not engaged in any of this stupidity. So it's way better incentive structures. So the second part of the question was, how can these modern missiles be implemented in a military role or government role? So with the military role and government role, the Darbar pipeline sort of outlines that the necessity in doing military roles and government roles and state roles for now is that that's where you build the competencies. Where else are we going to learn modern warfare tactics and strategies and ways of operating? We have to go to the best, right? Once we learn from the best, then we can start thinking about how to operate in our own terms. Now, the Gurkhas here in the UK have done this, right? They went through the British Army and the Royal Marine Service, whatever, right? And now they're in better positions to actually go set up their own private security companies, which is what they're doing. We can't do that as Sikh because we don't have the skills. We're still dressing up as medieval warriors to go sit in a spy. So we're no way equipped to start our own private military companies yet. Hence the point of our advocacy right now of getting more young things especially to start considering roles in the military and law enforcement so they can build the necessary competencies so they can later on have a talent pool which we can draw from to set up modern day missiles. So the only systems which have a moral grounded in atheistic worldview are hyper neoliberalism, hyper struggle through competition, or Darwinian fascist ideologies like Nazism. I don't know how to unpack that one. I might need to spend more time thinking about it, but I don't like the word neoliberalism because I don't think it's well defined. I think it's used too loosely by too many to refer to too many contradictory positions. So I don't think it's a useful term. There is a debate I was listening to the other day on basically somebody trying to reclaim the neoliberal label versus somebody who was saying, oh, forget it, we don't need to use the neoliberal label, and this guy's a libertarian, right? Now the word neoliberal, it first came up I believe the 1930s or the early 20th century at least, right? I think might be the late 19th. I can't remember, but there's like a council that was held by economists in Switzerland, and actually Ludwig von Mises actually attended it as well, and that's where the term neoliberal first came up as a kind of way to identify themselves as distinct from the classical liberals or whatever it was, and they all rejected it. They said, oh, it's a stupid term, we don't want to use it effectively. And so they dropped it, and then it only came back into use in the 1980s by critics of capitalism to basically label a lot like Reagan and Thatcher type economics as neoliberal, where it's probably better categorized as neoconservative maybe. I don't know, it's kind of weird, right? It's kind of, a lot of these isms, right, they're kind of like, it's just a whole vidya in it, like a whole, I wouldn't even say vidya, it's like a whole like distraction in of itself. Like, we should be more concentrating on the actual policies and actual the economics and things. This is why you don't actually find any word like capitalism or socialism or communism once in the manifesto. You didn't find it anywhere. I didn't use the word capitalism once or socialism. You can control left the whole thing, you won't find it. Because I was more concentrating on the actual policies themselves. Because all these isms you can get lost in quite easily, and everyone sort of defines them differently. So it gets quite a bit of a struggle. Although that being said, I do have an essay on it called, what is it called? Azaadi.co.uk code.uk/isms, and this is my comprehensive kind of reconciliation and attempt at looking at all the different types of isms and where Azaadism sort of fits in it and sort of like orients itself within these things. So I go through like capitalism versus socialism. What else do I go through? Oh yeah, but diagrams too, mixed economies, individualism versus collectivism. I'll put "and" because I don't think they're dichotomies. Libertarianism versus authoritarianism, so like voluntarism, that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in this isms stuff, I recommend reading this. Otherwise, I wouldn't really bother too much with them. Again, the neo-Khalistanis get obsessed with the isms a lot as well, and then that's their way of obfuscating, where they kind of deny having any actual real conversation on statecraft by just basically abstracting things and getting lost in the isms. But it's interesting. It can be an interesting conversation, but if it's in good faith. Which I know, Gunnar Singh, who actually asked the question there, he actually is in good faith when he brings this stuff up. So they are pretty funny conversations. Okay, so next question was... Objective morality exists in Sikhi due to logical consequences of ik and God. Duality means you can't ascribe these qualities to the object. Generally, not these that qualities can't exist. Good and bad can exist, but you can't call an object good or bad holistically. You can still judge an action. Yes, you can, but you have to be a subjective agent to do that. You can't be consistent in your non-duality kind of perspective and then still have dualities. It doesn't make sense to do that, right? As if I've understood your question correctly or your statement correctly. Do that for corners. Okay, random question. Okay. Very deep philosophical conversation on Bagoda or samosa. Okay. Okay, that's cool. I think we've wrapped up most of the questions there. Let's check the YouTube comments. Raj says, yes, G.R. did a PPE. Stormzy sponsors Cambridge degrees for blacks. Yeah, we really need to start sponsoring Sikh go doing Cambridge, Oxford or Harvard degrees, etc. And put that to use. Major thing we need to work on is the legal aspect. Creating a judicial process, everything will flow from there. Structures, etc. Need a way to agree first, then can unite. Yeah, I think probably the legal aspect is probably one of the most important parts of statecraft. Like, if you can get a good legal system, you've pretty much got a lot of it already there. A lot of the issues now around the world is governments doing tasks that they shouldn't be doing and not fixing the problems that they actually have are obviously related to the legal system. So India, for example, if it had an actual functioning, competent and reliable justice system, 90% of its problems will go away. But it doesn't, because justice, and it's ironic, right? For the land that is based on spirituality and like rich kind of like philosophical heritage, it has one of the worst justice systems. It's super ironic and embarrassing for them, but embarrassing for all of us really around the world as humans. Like, why can't we clock that legal systems are just one of the most important things you got to get right, and just focus on it? But we just don't seem to do that. So yeah, I do agree. Legal aspect is extremely important. It's actually one of the 4 functions of a state that Azaadism suggests. So Azaadism begins when you have a functioning national defence, policing, justice system and courts, and a tax administration. And if you make it more free from there, great, you're more Azad. But at minimum, you have to have those 4 things. Okay, what else? Any more questions? If not, I'm going to start wrapping it up. And then just need to quickly mention... Oh yeah, cool. I'll quickly mention this. So, how do I share this actually? Give me a second. I'm going to share my screen again, but on something else. So we've got some roles for Serva. If anyone wants to be up for it. I know a couple of guys have signed up. 3 guys have already. On board or more actually. Just remembered. Where is my... Oh yeah, got it. Okay, so let me share my screen on... If you're watching on YouTube, you're able to see the screen. Yeah, go on YouTube if you want to see what I'm showing. Let me check. Oh damn, I need to remember how to... It's so fiddly, this OBS thing. I mean, it should be easy. Oh, I'm probably just dumb actually. Oh, here it is. Okay, so on YouTube, you should be able to see my screen. Let me just... Alright, so if you want to get involved in helping us produce Vichaars and the Bunga, so obviously we've got a couple of authors and stuff. I produce a lot of Vichaars, obviously. I rant a lot on all this kind of stuff. So I think to help increase the professionalism of the Bunga and make sure things are going out correctly, I make a lot of spelling mistakes as well. It's probably a good idea to get these things reviewed before they go out. So I've got this new article I'm working on. I need to put more in actually. I've got a bunch in the backlog. But essentially, we've got this Notion page. If you're not familiar with Notion, Notion is a kind of note-taking app, um, which has quite a lot of the project management features in it. So I set up this page to basically go through our Vichaars before they go to published to the public. So in the backlog, we'll have a new Vichaar, and you click on it, and you can actually read the Vichaar. Oh yes, and Ruben, I have looked through some of this. I've not had a chance to reply yet, so I'll get through this as well, these suggestions. But I'll write in the Vichaar like as I want to. So this one's on Trump's kind of idea of buying Greenland from an Azaadi perspective, and then basically the whole idea of turning Greenistan to Greenistanistan kind of thing. Like how would the Khalsa go about acquiring Greenland if he wanted it, and basically that kind of topic related stuff. I think would be an interesting piece. If we were, similar to the Iran one we did a while back, a bit more detailed. So I'd write it in, and then you as reviewers or editors can come in and basically highlight and add comments. I think we should word it this way, or you made a mistake here, etc. Or even suggest like rewriting things in this way, whatever. And then I can sort of like come in and sort of like review it and add comments, or accept the suggestion or reject it, resolve it, whatever, right? And then once that's obviously in review, and then once it's ready, then that tells me or another Bunga member, oh, this is ready to make it to a post now, and then we can go post it, and then it's published, right? So it's the kind of system I want to start doing with Bunga members and you guys, anyone who wants to take the server to work with us. And this is one potential way of doing it. And any of the Bunga guys or authors who do work on Vichaars, feel free to use this as well. Like let me know, I can add your Vichaar to the backlog, and then the guys doing the reviewing server kind of go in and review your work as well, make sure it's proper ready by the time it comes out. So that's just something there. If you guys are interested in helping out with the Bunga, this is one way to do it. So let me know if that's something you want to be involved with. Again, this will contribute to your clearance level progression, your ranks, etc. as well, if you're interested in getting more involved with the Bunga. And then last thing I'll mention is I was going to go through the Iran article, but I think we ran out of time. Moral case against the NHS. Oh yeah, I've got another article. I'll probably publish that. We'll probably talk about it next time maybe. I've got an article basically making suggesting why the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, is actually quite immoral. So it'll be quite a very interesting one to see if I can convince anybody of my argument there, or what counter arguments might get. And the last one was on Lungar posts. Oh yes, there's some posts I came across on Instagram where they don't like Lungar people doing, or they like Lungar, but they don't like Lungar going outside the Gurdwara for some reason. There's some weird thing that's going on, and I remember debunking this a little while ago, like a year or two ago. It was neo-Khalistanis and Sikh socialists who were pushing this narrative, and I came across a post recently where they were making the same claim, exact same claim, wording as well, same. So it's the same group, obviously, right? The same mindsets behind it. So I was going to go through it today actually as well, and just bring that back up and what my counter arguments to it was. But I might actually make some posts from it as well, which again, stay tuned on Azaada's Instagram and Substack, and you get access to that. But yeah, I think let's call it a day there. Thank you guys who joined. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And obviously, any more questions and stuff, feel free to like use the Discord server and engage with each other. Use the forums as well. Set up topics, send cool links, that kind of thing. Give your Vichaar, we're interested in them. But other than that, I think we'll call it there for today. So thank you guys for joining. This recording should be available on YouTube as well afterwards. So if you couldn't make it live, whatever, or you couldn't listen to the whole way through, I don't blame you. You'll be able to see it on the YouTube channel. I think it's at Azaadism if you put that on the YouTube, or if you just search Bunga Azaadi, it should come up. And then lastly, just to plug the Vichaar repository again, so you can access this via azaadism.co.uk or straight to the Vichaar repository on bungaazadi.com. Then obviously follow the Instagram page, that's where we do all the fancy posts. I've got a new design template, we're going to trial this for a bit now. Let me know if you guys like it, and we'll continue with it, otherwise we might change it up again. So yeah, follow the Instagram, definitely follow the Substack. That's probably the more important way to follow us, is through Substack. Oh yeah, follow Game Sync Substack as well, because obviously if Instagram ever like implodes or whatever, then at least I'll have your emails and tell you guys we're still alive. maybe we'll go with Substack instead. So yeah, follow us on Substack. Oh yes, lastly, a little treat for you guys who stayed this long. I forgot to go through the actual questions. I'll go through the questions next time. So there's a question on somebody asked me related to like can Bunga Azaadi develop content for like primary school age kids and secondary school age kids, or parents to teach their kids, that kind of thing, right? On critical thinking skills. And it's a great timing for that question because we've actually been working on so another Bunga member, Gurpreet Singh, has been working on this project called Logic Nama. It's actually a branch of our Vichaar repository, section of the Vichaar repository. So we basically be going through all the logical fallacies and providing Sikh examples for it. So this will be a fully functioning website available soon. Still a bit work in progress. We're near the end of this now. Gurpreet Singh's actually done loads of work on it. So it's brilliant. So we'll go through all the different types of logical fallacies, like bandwagon fallacy, false cause, unfalsifiability, straw man, ad hominem, etc. Right, all the different types of fallacies. There's more to add. We're gonna probably publish with the 14ish we've got so far. Then we'll add more in time. But it's basically a list of logical fallacies with Sikh relevant examples. So feel free to use this as a reference guide when you're doing debates with people or you're studying literatures or content people are pushing out, and see, okay, are they committing a fallacy? So it's very important to familiarize yourself with this. So for example, you click on it, it'll give you like an example, and there's a bunch of examples on the side here as well. Like middle ground fallacy is a good one. I see this happen a lot, right? So it gives the example scenario, it gives you an understanding of why what the fallacy is, and applies it to the actual example as well to help you understand the actual fallacy, and just goes through it all, right? Gives you a little conclusion summary of it as well. So every sort of like logical fallacy we're going to go through and give Sikh relevant examples. So like, yeah, for example, like, yeah, Sikh says Sikhi is against meat because someone who they personally believe to be a Sant Baba had said so. And then we go, okay, well, this is an appeal to authority, and this is why it is a fallacious. And obviously, some of these examples have our bias, but obviously we use them as a way to spread our math as well, and say like, this is how a Sikh should be thinking, whatever. But I think they're relevant, and I think you guys might enjoy this. Feel free to submit more examples. We might create a nice little repository of each fallacy of different types of examples we can see. A lot of these examples we've given are things that I've heard or we've heard like in person or directly or quite often. So a lot of these examples are real life and quite relevant as well. But yeah, you might enjoy this. If you like this, it would be good for primary school kids and secondary school kids especially. Develop the critical thinking skills and get them to learn the logical fallacies, a bit like a nickname, right? And then you can go out into the world and you can recognize them. But that's it for today's Darbar. Again, thank you guys for joining. Let me know your feedback as well, anything to improve and that kind of stuff, and stay tuned. Hopefully I'll have more kind of cool stuff to do moving forward, more like interview type things, podcasty stuff, articles, Vichaars, and basically will help develop this think tank further to becoming one of the most preeminent think tanks in the Sikh Panth related to Sikhi, Statecraft and more. Okay, so thank you guys for joining. Waheguru Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.